The Nike Infinity Run 4, the first major redesign of this series since it was released over 3 years ago. But it feels like it's having a bit of an identity crisis. Is it a running shoe? Is it a lifestyle shoe? Or is it something else altogether? Now let's start with the specs on this shoe because they're kind of difficult to find online right now. Nike's generally a little cagey with specs on shoes as they first release, and it's no different with this. So the specs that I have found for this shoe were for a US size 10. And they're telling me that it's 39 millimeters of foam in the heel and 30 in the forefoot, giving you a 9 mil drop. But where this gets really bonkers is that this shoe weighs 12.5 ounces. Yes, 353 grams. I mean, it feels like a heavy shoe and it looks like a heavy shoe. It is a heavy shoe. Just for some reference there, the Infinity 3 was 10.7 ounces or 303 grams. So considerably heavier than that. And I remember people complaining about the Infinity 3. The Infinity 2 was 9.9 ounces or 280 grams. And I know the Infinity Run 1 was even lighter than that. And just for a little bit more reference, the Nike Invincible 3 is 10.6 ounces or 300 grams. But unlike this shoe, the Invincible 3 feels much lighter, feels much smaller when you're running in it. But when you're running in this shoe, it feels every ounce 12.5 ounces. So that gets into the fit of this shoe. Now, let's talk about this upper first. So Nike's making two claims in their marketing copy with this upper. They're saying it's the best fitting Flyknit yet, and that the updated upper has increased volume in the toe area. Well, I can officially say that both those claims are wrong because this is one of the worst fitting uppers of any Nike shoe that I can remember in maybe 8 or 9 years. And it has an extremely low volume toe box to the point where it's painful to run in because there's no room for your toes, at least my toes. And I never have problems with toe boxes. And in fact, I've found Nike's toe boxes to be overly generous the past couple years. This is the exact opposite of that. They're also saying that it's got a new midfoot support system and a water-resistant liner, which I think is really just in the forefoot of this shoe. But still, there's a lot of material in this upper, which kind of explains the weight of this shoe because there's a lot of stuff going on in this shoe. Now, the upper feels very similar to the Turbo Next Nature if you've worn that or run in that shoe. As far as weight, it's much softer though, so that's a good thing. The heel counter in this shoe is very similar, if not the same, I think, to what's in the Pegasus 40, which is a good thing. So lots of padding around here, very stout heel counter. Again, you're not going to have any sort of heel slip issues in this shoe. Overall, the upper does the job, but it is in no way the best fitting Flyknit upper yet. Let's get into what I think are the two most interesting parts of this shoe, and let's start with ReactX foam. What is it? Well, as of a couple days ago, we now know what it is because Nike's released some press information about it, and it's very clear now what this foam is. So it is React. It is not a recycled material. It's not a biomaterial like what ASICS is doing with the Gel Nimbus 25 with FF Blast Plus Echo. It is a React material. It is React. The difference is that the way it's molded. So traditionally React midsoles have used a technology called compression molding, which means you have a mold, you put a blank of foam that's either a rectangle or shaped like a shoe, you put it in the mold, you put a top down on the mold, and with pressure, you press the foam or the blank into the final part. What ReactX is actually using a different technology called injection molding, where you have a mold that has a cavity in it, and then you inject the material into the mold, filling the cavity and thus making the part. Now, I have a lot more experience with injection molding, especially with lower durometer parts. And this is when I was racing skateboards. I spent a lot of time in wheel development, so I've worked a lot with injection molding of lower diameter parts. And I'll say a couple things about this. I'm not surprised it took Nike, what they're claiming, 5 years to develop this technology, because it's a tricky thing, especially with those lower durometers, because the material that you're injecting into the mold, you need it to be airy, which is the right word, because you don't want it to be too liquid, because you need the material to go into the mold and fill the mold, fill all the nooks and crannies in the mold, but also not pool anywhere. And also it needs to channel any sort of air pockets or air bubbles in there. And ideally you want it to become part of the structure of the final part, as opposed to just making air bubbles in there. And that's why you want a more airy material in there, which will capture the air and make it part of the final part. That's a tricky process. And again, I'm not surprised it took Nike so long to do that. So Nike's making a couple other claims here around what ReactX is. So they're saying there's a 43% reduction in the carbon footprint of this foam. Now, I read the press release over and over and over on this to make it clear in my mind what they're talking about. And I think Nike's being a little tricky with copywriting here and the marketing, because what they're claiming here, and this is where I think a lot of people online and social media are getting confused, is that, again, it's not a recycled material, it's not a biomaterial. That 43% reduction in the carbon footprint is in specifically the manufacturing process. They're specifically calling out the injection molding versus compression molding. Now, I think if you look at the entire manufacturing process of a shoe, one using compression molding, one using injection molding, I'm going to bet there's some efficiencies in injection molding, because there's some steps you don't need to do with it versus what you need to do in compression molding, but it's minor. And especially if you look at the supply chain to a finished product for compression molding versus injection molding, I bet it's kind of a wash. It's pretty close. So Nike is calling out that, ESG, statement of, the carbon footprint and all that stuff on that specific manufacturing process, and that alone. So it's not wrong. It's just a little tricky the way Nike's wording it. The other thing, though, that I think is more important for runners is that Nike's also claiming there's a 13% increase in energy return, which I will say, when you first put this shoe on, or you first feel this foam, you first press this foam, you can feel that it is a softer foam. It is softer. And when you put your foot in this shoe, you do feel that it is a softer foam. It does feel more bouncy. I would say that this ReactX foam feels much closer to maybe FF Blast Plus than React traditionally has. And that, I think, is probably a good thing. It's one of the more exciting things about this shoe. So let's move on to the next thing that I think is really exciting about this. And this is more something that I've been asking Nike to do for quite a long time. So when you look at this shoe, a lot of people are commenting on social media that this black bar here is a heel to toe heel clip. Because remember, the Infinity Run series has always had a heel clip. There's always been a TPU or plasticky element inserted in the heel that gave the shoe some structure. Well, I can tell you outright that this black piece of material is just foam. There is no heel clip in this shoe. This is not a TPU. This is foam. The midsole on this shoe is a two-piece midsole. So the white part is a piece of foam and the black part is a piece of foam. So there may be a durometer difference between these two pieces of foam. It doesn't really feel like that when you press it, but there is no heel clip in this shoe. There is no additional part in this heel, and there is no more heel clip in this shoe. Instead, what Nike's doing is they're using the foam and they're building it up around the heel, very similar to what ASICS does with the Nova Blast 3. And I talked a lot about this in my Invincible 3 at 100 mile video, that I wish Nike would drop the heel clips and use the foam around the heel to really build it up. And that's exactly what they've done here. So that's really exciting. I think it works really well in this shoe, and I'll talk about that, how this shoe runs. But for the Invincible, I'm actually a bit more excited. Maybe not the Invincible 4, because the Invincible 4 is just going to be, an upper update like it's been, because it's an even number. But the Invincible 5, I hope that we see the foam wrapping around the heel and Nike dropping the heel clip on that platform as well. So what is it like to run in this shoe? Well, I am a forefoot striker who supinates. So I land on my toe and I land on the outside edge. I am not the runner that this shoe's designed for at all. Because as a forefoot runner, when I'm running on the front of this shoe, it feels at best meh, and at worst, it just feels completely dead. And some of that is due to just how much material is in this upper, and then how much rubber is on the bottom of this shoe. This is a full rubber outsole, and I like full rubber outsoles. It's one of the reasons I love the Pegasus so much, but this is a lot of rubber, and any feel or any sort of new bounce that you're going to get from this foam, it's really deadened by this outsole. And the other thing about this outsole is that it's just, I think, generic rubber. It's not even the more high performance rubber that they do put on the Pegasus. It's just the rubber you'd find on any old Nike, and it really just deadens the whole shoe. So when I'm running on the forefoot, this shoe is actually very flexible. It just pancakes out. Yeah, there's a little bounce in the foam, but it honestly feels kind of horrible. And because there's no volume in the toe, just everything just feels like it's getting crunched up here. Additionally, Nike says that this is a 9mm drop, so 9mm difference from heel to toe. But honestly, this feels not like that. It actually feels like there's more drop in this shoe, which is kind of crazy. If you remember the Air Roush, or Air Roush, however you want to say that, where that was an extreme sort of wedge feeling, and it would really just kind of smash your toes into the front of the shoe if you walked in it. I get the same feeling here. In fact, after my last run in this shoe, I got insane blisters on the bottoms of my big toe on both feet from just feeling like my toe was trying to grip into the midsole to kind of stabilize itself. Not a very pleasant feeling as a forefoot runner. I would not recommend this shoe for forefoot running. But it's a totally different story if you switch to heel striking. And that is obviously what this shoe is designed for. And you can see it in the design of the shoe. Look at this extreme rocker. This shoe has so much heel to toe rocker. I haven't seen a shoe with this much rocker in it in many years. It reminds me of some of the initial Hoka shoes from like 10 years ago. There is an insane amount of heel to toe rocker. And in fact, in the Nike line, there's only one other shoe that probably has more crazy heel to toe rocker, and that's the Motiva. And I think there's a connection between these two shoes, which I'll get to at the end of this video. But for this shoe, once I switched to a heel strike and I was landing on the heel, immediately the midsole and the structure on the heel would channel that energy, capture my foot, bring me into the midfoot, and then the momentum would carry me over, roll me off the toe. So it was using the momentum of my body, of my gait, to roll me forward. And this shoe just rolls you forward as long as you're engaging on the heel and moving forward to the toe. If you're just engaging in the toe, forget it. You're not getting anything. You're just pancaking out because the midsole is so soft. The shoe's just flattening out. And it's not pleasant to run in. But if you're a heel striker, I actually think this could become one of your favorite shoes, especially if you're a heavy heel striker, because there's just so much support. And you can also kind of see in the sidewall here on the lateral side, there's this divot, which when you land on it, it really compresses, absorbs that energy. And on the medial side, there's a very strong sidewall here. So there's a ton of foam in here to channel and protect overpronation. Again, as a forefoot striker who supinates, I'm landing on the outside of my foot, I don't get any of that. So again, as a forefoot striker, this isn't designed for me, and it honestly doesn't work for me. The Invincible is a much better running shoe. There is a mild rocker in the Invincible 3, but the difference with that shoe is when I am up on the toe in that shoe, there's a nice pocket in there that feels really good, and there's a bit of a toe camber or toe rocker there that really does work. This shoe doesn't have that because the foam is very flexible. So, and I think that's a design choice because you're landing in this very cushy, soft foam, you're rolling forward, and then the shoe is really just rolling you off the toe. It's a very roly-poly feeling when you're running this shoe, when you're engaging in the heel. Some people will really like that. I don't like heavily rockered shoes, and this is one of the most extreme ones I've run in some time. That leads me to, how am I going to use this shoe? Well, to be honest, I'm probably not. I'm probably not going to run in this shoe again. Not going to say never sort of thing, but I have no use for this shoe. The Pegasus 40 is a better, more versatile, more performance oriented, more fun, more engaging, better shoe all around as a daily trainer. And the Invincible 3 is a better performance trainer than this, and it actually works better for forefoot striking than this. And I think the Vomero 17 that will be coming out fairly soon will be a better cushion trainer to this. But where I think this shoe works really well, as I said, I think if you're a heel striker, you may love this shoe more than any other Nike shoe that I can think of in some time. And that, I think, speaks to what this shoe is. And I said at the beginning of this video that I think the Infinity Run series has a bit of an identity crisis, but I think it's kind of clear where it's headed now. So Nike created a new program called the Well Collective about a month or two ago, and that's focused on what they're calling holistic fitness, which is about movement and mindfulness and nutrition and rest and being connected to your community and all of those, attributes that I think Nike's really leaning in heavily to. And that's great. And it makes sense because they're making new product for that. There's a lot of athleisure wear or yoga wear that's kind of falling into that program. The Nike Motiva, which I talked about a little bit in this video already, that's one of the shoes that's come out in that program, or you see connected to that program quite a bit. And what that shoe is Nike calls it a walking shoe, but in their marketing copy, they say that you can jog and run in it. And where I see this shoe fitting in now is that this is the next step for that person who maybe started with the Motiva. And again, the Motiva is really focused around probably more walking, and it's a walking shoe that you could jog in a little bit. But I think the target customer there really is someone who's just looking to get in maybe 5,000-10,000 steps a day and really just start down their fitness journey. Where this shoe would now come in would be once that user takes that shoe and like, oh, okay, like I'm enjoying running, like they've turned jogging into a little bit more structured running and they're ready for the next step. I think that's exactly where this comes in. So this is a running shoe, but I think it's a running shoe that's more of a fitness shoe, because I think this is that bridge between what Nike's trying to do with the Well Collective and the Nike running line. And this feels like a really good connection and bridge from, that more sort of holistic fitness side of things into running. And I can just imagine the decks in the strategic documents that have been going around Nike HQ for the past 12 to 18 months, because I've done a lot of these documents in my professional career of building user personas, looking at market research, doing consumer journeys, and I can clearly see the slide in the deck somewhere that takes the Motiva, connects it to the Infinity Run 4, and then maybe connects it to a Zoomfly 5 or an Invincible on the far end. So it goes from starting your fitness journey to now training for maybe your first 10K sort of thing. And I can completely see that consumer journey. So this shoe feels like it now has a home as a bridge between those two things, which is cool. It's not to say that this isn't a serious running shoe. Again, I think if you're a heel striker, or especially I think if you're a newer runner that maybe does need this heel to toe rocker and will benefit from just getting moving, just getting into running comfortably, this is going to be a great shoe. And if you're a more advanced runner and you are a heel striker, you're probably going to like it. Again, if you're a mid to forefoot striker, I think there's going to be better shoes for you. within Nike and outside of Nike. But for newer runners, I would actually put this on par with the Asics Nova Blast 3. I think the Nova Blast 3 is a much better shoe, but for someone who wants to stick with Nike, I think this is a great first running shoe option for many runners. Thank you for making it to the end of the video. If you like this content, subscribe. You'll see more content like this pop up in your feed. If not, drop a like on this video because it helps this channel continue to grow, which I'm always appreciative of. And with that, I'll see you in the next one.